Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Duke Wisdom Podcast. So the topic of today's episode is primarily about kind of what Duke needs to do, what Duke needs to look for, and what is Duke going to look for in recruiting its class of 2025. There haven't been any commitments for Duke, nor really any of the guys they're going after in the class of 2025. Their search pool, I think, is a little smaller. I think their commitment pool for the class of 25 will be smaller than the class of 2024. There are reasons for that I will get into. First, though, before I really start talking about recruiting too much, let's dive into a piece of Duke news that I sort of teased on Tuesday's episode, and that's Cameron Sheffield from Rice. So Sheffield, not the first player to ever transfer to Duke from Rice. If you're a real ball knower, you know that's Sean Obi, who transferred to Duke after his freshman season at Rice in 2014, where he was like a double-double machine. Came to Duke, sat out the 2015 season, still gets a national championship ring, though, and then plays in like quotations 2 seasons at Duke in 16 and 17, where he battled injuries the entire time and really didn't have a lot of luck before being a graduate transfer to Maryland for his final season. Duke, though, has a graduate transfer coming in, Cameron Sheffield, who averaged 7.6 points per game in the last season he played in, which was 2022-23. Sheffield arrived at Rice in 2020-2021, where he, obviously that year of eligibility is wiped clean. He then plays in 22, plays in 23, where he averages just over 7.5 points a game. And then last season does not play due to injury. Sheffield now playing in what will be his, I guess, third used year of eligibility. So he has, although he is a graduate of Rice, he has 2 more years of eligibility left as a player. So that's an interesting look. He is a 6'6" kind of wing player that can shoot the ball well, at about a 38% clip from 3. He's not a bad driver as well. Cameron Sheffield is a very good practice player, basically. I mean, I don't like calling guys that, but to me, he's flashing the red signals of Cale Catchings from a couple years ago, where it's like a 9-point per game guy at Harvard, a guy who's obviously capable and you can put in the game and he can do things, but you're not really going to put him in the game. And that's no slight at Sheffield. That's just kind of indicative of all the talent that Duke has already, and also indicative of the fact that Sheffield is the magical height that John Shire has fallen. You know, I don't know what it is. That second recruiting class for last year's team, and that whole team, John Shire fell in love with point guards. He said, I just want as many point guards as I can possibly shove into a roster. And this season, he said, let's everyone who's 6'6", gimme. Like, he's like, please, if you're 6'6", you are a Duke basketball player. I don't get it. I don't know what the deal is with the height, but there's so many dudes who are exactly 6'6". I mean, we're talking Mason Gillis, Isaiah Evans, Darren Harris, Con Knippel, now Cameron Sheffield. Heck, Foster and Proctor only an inch off. It's kind of crazy that Proctor and Foster are the 2 shortest guys on this entire basketball team at 6'5". Just a massively tall team, a massively old team, like the oldest Duke team since 2013, that is. Sheffield adds to that in age and experience. He will certainly be a valuable asset for Duke, both in the minutes he does play on the floor, but then also in practice and helping develop some of those other freshmen who play the same position as him. That'll be very beneficial, I think, for Duke from a practice standpoint, but also a game standpoint, because I think he's a dependable guy, even if you're just throwing him in kind of at the ends of more lopsided games. I think he's a valuable player to have. He's the 12th scholarship player. There is 1 scholarship left after that. I know there have been people that are talking about we have to get another ball handler. We have to get another proven big man. No, they don't have to get another ball handler. Like, Proctor and Foster, fine. And if one of them gets hurt, the other one just plays point guard, and it's okay. They're probably going to play like 35 minutes a game anyway, so you're not really going to have a whole lot of time without them on the floor. Anywho, and then so you don't really necessarily need another guy. And I think there are other guys that can serve the purpose of getting the ball up the floor. As for a big man, I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt, but like, Common's really good. And if he were to get hurt, like, I know people are kind of weary of banking on Patrick Gongba as the only backup. And you've also got Malik Brown, who's more than capable of playing at the 4 and heck at the 5, I think. And so Duke's fine. Duke has its rotation. It has everyone who needs to play. They don't need to introduce anybody else who needs to command any more minutes. And that's why the 13th scholarship is almost certainly going to be awarded to Stanley Borden as a senior next season. So Borden will get that last scholarship most likely. And that will end Duke's search for any players. And I think the real search left, if there's any more new faces you'll see on next year's roster, it'll be 2 new walk-ons, actually, which is always exciting times. Love seeing the new walk-ons. I hope they're both freshmen so we can get 4 years, because the 4-year walk-ons, they always get that love. We've been searching for that Todd Zafirovsky high ever since 2014, man. It's been like, Nick Pagliuca, love Nick Pagliuca, love Sean Kelly, love Brennan Besser, love those guys, love Mike Buckmeyer, Spencer Hubbard, Stanley Borden, love that guy. Dude, that sax solo is the greatest thing that ever happened in Duke basketball history. But that I don't know, it's just that Todd Zafirovsky high, like the we want Todd, we haven't been able to achieve in about a decade. We got to get there. We got to get there again. Let's put 2 new freshman walk-ons and just see what goes down. Stanley Borden now entering his 4th year. He is the final player to play for Coach K left in the program. So give the man his scholarship for his senior season. I think it's due time that happens. So that's Duke's roster. Be on the lookout for some more commentary and perhaps rankings to do with that roster. That'll be coming soon for Duke Wisdom. But anyway, that's the Cameron Sheffield piece of this episode. Now let's jump into the real topic of the conversation, which is recruiting.
Want to join a community of Duke accounts publishing news, theories, and predictions on Duke athletics? Join the Duke Wisdom Network. Just go to dukewisdom.org/join network today and fill out the form with your name and social media. Or you can DM at Duke_wisdom on Twitter or Instagram. Become a part of the community of Duke fans publishing their takes today. Again, that's dukewisdom.org/join network or DM at Duke_wisdom on Twitter or Instagram.
I mentioned there's no commitments yet. Now, at this time last year, Duke had already landed Darren Harris. Now, I think that there's no reason to fret. Like, we don't have any commitments yet. I mean, like, the summer hasn't even happened. AAU circuit hasn't happened. That's where like all the recruiting goes down. You're honestly considered a fairly early commitment if you commit during the summer. So usually, those commitments are going to fall in November during the fall signing period. So no reason to fret. Who does Duke need? What kind of spots do I anticipate are going to be freed up? Well, let's start with Flag and Malawach. Obviously, are going to get freed up. They're gone as one and dones. I figure that Tyrese Proctor will also be gone after his junior season to the NBA. I think he'll have a good enough season for that this year. Losing at least those 3 starters. And then I think I've got Malik Brown starting personally at the moment. So I'm going to say he's back for his senior season and Caleb Foster's back for his junior season after next season. However, Mason Gillis runs out of eligibility, so does Sion James. So you're losing both those guys. And if you lose Proctor, Malawach, and Flag, that's 5. Stanley Borden would leave a 6th scholarship open. So that's at least 6 scholarships open. You got to think at least 1 or 2 guys are going to transfer based off what we just saw last year. I mean, you never know, actually. I guess it's possible that you don't lose anybody, really. Like after Shire's first year, they didn't lose anybody to the portal. I think it's not out of the question that they would not lose anybody to the portal again. I mean, it's probably not likely, but it's not out of the question. I think, no one wants to see anybody from this upcoming freshman class transfer like, last year's team with Stewart and Power. But obviously it seems likely that one of Evans, Gongba, Kneppel, and Harris, at least one of them would enter the portal. It seems likely. I don't want to put that out in the air. So I'm going to go out on a limb and let's say Duke has 7 scholarships. Let's say they get 3 of those 4 freshmen that I just named back. Let's say they get Foster back and they get Brown back and then Sheffield for a final year, although Sheffield might just transfer as well, honestly. They've got to fill some spots here. They've got to fill some bigs, or at least a good big. They got to fill some like a high level wing probably, and probably a higher level backcourt player, like a point guard type player. So who's Duke going after? They've sent out, I think, 9, if I'm counting right, 9 scholarship offers. So those players, I'll read them out to you, and I'm going to give you the 24/7 Sports rankings for these players. That's Malik Thomas, who's a 6'4" point guard. He's ranked 9th nationally. You got Caden Boozer. Everybody knows Caden Boozer. He's the point guard version of the Boozer twins. 6'3", ranked 16th nationally. You got Braden Berry's ranked 12th shooting guard. Jalen Harrelson, that's a big name to watch right now. He's been playing very well in the circuit as of late. I'll talk about Harrelson as well. 6'6" combo guard, ranked 11th nationally. AJ DeBonsa, who is the number 1 overall player in the class. You should know his name. 6'9" small forward. Nate Ament, who's ranked 13th nationally. A small forward. Cameron Boozer, who's the number 2 player in the country. Obviously, you know Cameron Boozer. Again, he's the large version of the Boozer twins. Koa Pete, who is ranked 5th nationally, he's a power forward. And then Caleb Wilson, also a power forward, ranked 6th nationally. He's 6'9". Pete is 6'8". I forgot to mention Boozer is 6'9" as well. DeBonsa is 6'9" as well. So I think some big names here are the Boozer twins, obviously. Jalen Harrelson, AJ DeBonsa. Those are big names. I think those are real big names for Duke at the moment. And I think also maybe Malik Thomas, maybe Pete as well. But I want to focus on the Boozers at first, because I think obviously you want to see Cam and Caden at Duke because of Carlos. And it feels, and I think a lot of Duke fans have just sort of been under this assumption that the Boozer twins would come for a long time. And then more recently, there's been kind of the flip where it's like, oh no, maybe actually we don't think we're going to get them at all, is maybe some fans' kind of thought process. I don't think that Duke is out of that process. I'll go ahead and say that right now. But it certainly isn't a Cooper Flagg scenario where dudes were pretty confident. Like, Cooper Flagg grew up a Duke fan. The Boozers grew up, their dad went to Duke, but they're different people than their dad. And oftentimes, a lot of guys want to be different than their dad, and that can lead them to not go to the same school as their dad. So I think that I think Duke certainly has its work cut out for it. If John Shire wants to land Cameron and Caden Boozer, it probably won't be the easiest thing in the world. The silver lining, though, is that Duke has spots for him. Like, Kaman Malawach is going to head out, and so you've got a starting slot as a big already carved out for Cameron Boozer. Tyrese Proctor's gone after year 3. You've got that slot carved out for Caden, whether he's ready to start or not, but you've got it there, and next to Caleb Foster in the backcourt. So there are opportunities for both of those players, and I think the exciting opportunity is that there are opportunities for both of them to commit, as well as a guy like AJ DeBonsa or a guy like Jalen Harrelson. Now, are they going to get Harrelson, DeBonsa, and the Boozers? No, I don't think they're going to get all of them. I really don't. But, I mean, hey, dude, never say never. Zion, Cam, and RJ, same class. Never say never when it comes to Duke basketball recruiting. That's kind of the lesson I've learned. But Harrelson's played so well in the circuit. I expect him to move up, and I think he's becoming a big target for Shire. So we'll see what happens with Jalen Harrelson, but I think he's interesting. I think that, obviously, I mentioned AJ DeBonsa. I think if you're Duke, always try to nab the number 1 player in the class, and Duke nabs the number 1 player in the class a lot. I think DeBonsa is such a skilled player. He's such a great player. Just go to get him. He's the closest thing after you lose Cooper Flagg, who will almost certainly be the number 1 pick in 2025. That you lose a guy like that, and you want to replace him with another guy who can be a high-level player like that and play a similar position, who is the same height. You get AJ DeBonsa. He's proven time and time again he's just such a prolific prospect. So I think he should be a priority if you're Duke, and then Jalen Harrelson and the Boozers. I think those are your top priorities, but also you need a point guard guy, right? Like, so if you strike out on Caden Boozer, who's the other guy? Well, it's Malik Thomas. That's the other guy to go after, right? And so there are so many names on here who are interesting and who Duke can get involved with further and already is involved with. but those 9 guys will grow. Also, it's not going to remain at 9 throughout this summer as Shire and the coaching staff go and they watch these other players, they watch these other prospects, 4-star, 5-star, whoever it might be. Obviously, there will be more offers. Duke will probably land at least one guy who I haven't even mentioned in this episode yet. That's the nature of recruiting. But I think it's interesting to know, like, what roles are we expecting the returners to play so we know who needs to come in. Obviously, Foster, who I expect to start in the backcourt this year, I think will be back again. Unless Duke goes crazy, wins the national title, and Foster's a massive, massive piece of that, then he could possibly go pro, actually, which would change a lot of things for that 25-26 team. But I'm under the impression that I think Caleb Foster will play a junior season at Duke. So if you got Foster there, you know he's in the lineup. You know, probably Malik Brown is a senior. If he's still around, is probably in that starting lineup and a veteran kind of presence. You know, you got those 2 guys. And then, well, if Isaiah Evans is back as a sophomore, you have to think this is a guy that can start as a sophomore. And so you're like, do we really only need 2 more starters instead of 3? Or will Malik Brown, can he be pushed to being the 6th man? Evans does start, and then say you build Devonta Boozer and, Harrelson. That's just a hypothetical. But you build that into the starting lineup, and if Knipple doesn't transfer, is there a place for him to start? Or does he have to beat out Isaiah Evans? Does he have to beat out a freshman? Like, is there a path to starting for him as a sophomore? Is there a path to Patrick Gongba starting as a sophomore? Or is Kamen Malawatch just going to leave and then Duke's going to start whatever big man, like Cameron Boozer, that they get in next year's class? Is he just going to start and Gongba doesn't really have a legitimate path to starting and he's just the backup big man again? That's an interesting question. Is there a path for Darren Harris to play? Because if he doesn't transfer, Evans is still back. He's got to get through him to even be considered to start, or he's got to get through Knipple to even be considered to start. And then not to mention the freshmen coming in. And all of this conversation is forgetting the transfer portal exists, which I think the firm possibility I've talked about, 6, 7, 8 scholarships being freed after this season. What's the likelihood that Shire's bringing in 6, 7, 8 freshmen? Low. Extremely low, actually. I think this will be probably one of the smaller recruiting classes he's got. It'll probably resemble more of the 2023 class where Shire brought in 4 players who were 4 very good players, 5-star players, and Jared McCain. I think there'll be some of the top players in this class will be ranked higher than like McCain was, but like who was the highest ranked one. But Jared, Sean, TJ, Caleb, those 4 guys, it'll be more like that in size. Obviously, you're going to add a couple more guys from the portal next year. Duke just added 4 guys, right? 4 guys from the portal. This year, I expect them to add at least a couple, probably next season as well. And so that's completely taking that out of account. And I cannot, in May of this year, even begin to predict what that situation is going to look like. All I can predict is what I think will probably happen with the guys that are going to be on next year's team in terms of who I think will stay and go. That is constantly going to be evolving as the season progresses, though. And it can be changed directly by how these recruiting efforts by Shire and staff go during the summer. Like if Shire gets, he gets Jalen Harrelson, that can impact Isaiah Evans' decision to either go to the NBA or transfer, and it can certainly impact Knipple's decision in that manner as well. I mean, look at all of the wing players that Duke just brought in, is bringing in as freshmen. You cannot convince me that did not impact TJ Powers' decision to transfer. You go, oh, well, TJ Powers' decision is a purely personal decision, and the guys they're bringing in doesn't impact that at all. That's not true. If Duke had not recruited Harris, Knipple, and Evans, and then committed fully and said, TJ, you've got all those minutes next year. We believe in you to do that 100%. We're not bringing anybody else competing like that significantly with you. Now, I'm not saying that's the path to take, but I'm saying that TJ Power would still be a Blue Devil if that were the case, I think. Whether you agree with that or not, I think there obviously are so many personal reasons for transferring There are so many reasons for transferring, but you cannot convince me that these guys don't look at who's coming in and that's not a piece of their decision. I think it very clearly is a piece of their decision always. And whether you think that or not, that is obviously a piece of the decision. So I think that's, whoever they bring in this summer could inform potential transfer decisions next spring. We'll see about that. We'll see who they land. I expect about 3, I'd say 4 is a safe number for this recruiting class. Commitment wise, we'll see some roll in, maybe get one during the summer, but certainly during the fall signing period as well. I think it's an interesting class for Duke. I think Duke will have some pretty good returning talent, but not like its best players like they had after the 23 season into last year where you had the top 4 scorers coming back. That's not going to happen because I think, your top 3 players are probably gone at least. And so interesting look. Don't know exactly where they stand with each player, but obviously a few of the names I read of those 9 guys that Duke has offered, you'll be seeing in a Duke jersey, but the majority of which you probably won't. And so that's because some of those names they have already fallen back on recruiting wise. I think Caleb Wilson's a good example of that, a guy that Duke's just not going to land, but has an offer from Duke that he landed about a year ago. And so that's sort of the Duke, the pre recruiting roundup, the big picture. How many guys are they going to get? Who's going to leave? What positions do they need to fill? That's kind of what this episode was. As the recruiting focus becomes more clear later in the summer around, the EYBL circuit and Peach Jam and that kind of thing in July, that's when we'll get more into the nitty gritty of who are the exact names of players that Duke is looking to add. Because right now, we don't know exactly what names are going to be committing to Duke and whatnot. So we can't one for one project that roster in 25-26. But I think it's fun to talk about as recruiting season really ramps up and John Shire's sitting in person watching a lot of these guys play right now. And so it's an interesting conversation to have, I think. And so I think that I'll get more into some cool hypothetical questions that I'm hoping to have collaboration episodes on. A lot of exciting stuff for the Duke Wisdom Network coming soon as well that I talked about on Tuesday's episodes in terms of potential merchandising incentives to be in the Duke Wisdom Network. Certainly articles coming out as the summer progresses and as I graduate. Another thing to be on the lookout for, as we're talking, as you're listening to this, you know what Duke baseball has begun doing or is doing in the ACC tournament. I don't know what that is because I'm recording this beforehand, but Duke baseball in a position to really get or lose a regional host position in the ACC tournament right now. Duke baseball probably in its best position it's been in a long time to make a push to make the College World Series, and I'd really like to see that happen. I've been very locked in on Duke baseball. Also Duke softball, obviously, in the later part of this week, starting like Thursday, Friday. They're playing in the Super Regional against Missouri, and so they'll have a shot to make the College World Series as well, which is very exciting. And so on that note, make sure to follow Duke Wisdom Athletics, Duke Wisdom Women's Basketball, Duke Wisdom Football. And also, if you join the Duke Wisdom Network, that's something I'm going to start. I'm looking for passionate fans to run those accounts actually and be a big part of what we do here. And so I'll put out more about that into the world when the time gets nearer. But as always, thank you guys for listening to this episode. Make sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. Follow Duke Wisdom on Twitter/X and Instagram, and I'll talk to you guys later.